Hey everyone, Pete Werner here, and welcome to another of our Best and Worst of Walt Disney World series. Today we are going to talk about the best table service restaurants at the Walt Disney World resorts. We've already done worst, so we thought we would do the best. For this, I am joined by my associate producer, Mr. Oliver Green, who's back on the controls.
Hello.
Oliver didn't have a list of his worst because he's just all rainbows and pixie dust.
Hey, I'm not that bad. I'm easily impressed. I think that's what it is. I've before obviously I came to work at the Diz. I'd experienced some table service locations, but I hadn't got a huge knowledge on them. And obviously these guys have been doing it for so long that they only take me to the best. So it was very, very easy for me to pick out my best.
We really only go to the places I like,
and there's nothing wrong
because
with
I'm paying for it. So if it's my money, I'm gonna spend it in places I think the meal's gonna be good. I don't go out of my way to have bad experiences. But anyway, so Oliver has his list and I have mine, and we have not shared our list with one another. So I'm gonna start off, and I have ordered this in the order that I like them. The order that I think that they should be in. I'm going to give the same. What's the word I'm looking for? Disclaimer that I did on the last one of these we did, which is these are our opinions based on our experiences, and you may differ, and neither one of us is wrong, and no one should make a decision to eat or not eat at a restaurant based on what we say. What you should do is use this as part of the information you gather in planning your trip. Listen to other people's trip reports, other people's opinions, and then make that decision for yourself. But we're going to throw our 2 cents into the mix, starting with what's number 5 on my list, which is the Yachtsman Steakhouse at the Yacht Club. This is a perennial favorite, and the reason that I rank it at number 5 is that I feel like it's still very good and still worth going to. Not as good, though, as it has been in years past. I feel that some of it has started to slip a little bit, not much. It's also extraordinarily expensive. And so those two things combined kind of put it at the bottom of my best list at number 5. What is your number 5?
Before I move on to my number 5, it's interesting because it's on my list as well, the Yachtsman, but it's definitely not number 5. So it'll be interesting to see where that falls, because I've only ate there the once, but I was very impressed with it. So going back to what my number 5 is, though, my number 5 is Sanaa, Animal Kingdom Lodge.
Oh, good call.
Yeah, I've always found eating there, which I have done multiple times, to be very, very enjoyable. Always had great service. It's the setting as well. If you can get one of those tables right up against the savannah, you will have an absolutely amazing experience, and paired along with the exceptionally good food. It definitely deserves its spot in the top 5.
I agree, and I think the three of the best dining locations on Disney property, period, are all at Animal Kingdom Lodge, and Sanaa in Boma, which is a buffet, so not eligible for this list, and Jiko. Sanaa, very good choice. I also enjoy Sanaa. It did not make my list, but it is a restaurant I enjoy. So number 4 on my list kind of skirts the line between buffet and table service, but because it is predominantly a table service restaurant in terms of how things are served, number 4 goes to Ohana at the Polynesian. And this is a big change for me because 3 or 4 years ago, I would have put this on my worst list. They really have improved the quality of food, the quality of service, the flavors, everything. It's just a great experience.
Yeah.
And consistently now, I think in the last year alone, I've probably eaten there 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And each time I walk away saying, wow, this was a great meal. So for me, number 4 is Ohana at the Polynesian. What about you?
This is why I love doing these shows, and we genuinely don't compare our lists until we sit down and we start recording.
Until we're on camera.
And number 4 for me is Ohana at the Polynesian Village Resort. So, and pretty much for the same reasons. Now, you said it's improved for you, but for me, I've never ever had a bad meal there ever, and it's always been very consistent, very, very good. great service, amazing food, and yeah, it's just it's crazy good.
See,
I can't communicate how good the meats are there. It's
they're really good.
It's really,
but
really
it was very good, and then it started getting very bad. We were constantly getting overcooked meat. It wasn't really very good quality, and the service was getting really jaded. I felt like they had a lot of servers there that had been there for a long time. They didn't care. It was a popular restaurant. They were going to make their tips one way or the other, so they just kind of phoned it in. That has not been my experience these last 4 or 5 times that I've been there. Even more than that, actually, but especially over the last year. Certainly hasn't been my experience. So, interesting. We agree on number 4.
One thing, just before we move on from that, I know there's a lot of people out there that do enjoy Ohana a lot, and one of the favourites is the bread pudding. If for any reason you're ever dining next door at also a very good restaurant, but it didn't make it onto my list, if you're ever dining at Kona and you ask very, very nicely, they normally will bring you the bread pudding from next door.
And that bread pudding is something everyone should experience once in their life. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Also, keep in mind that if you are staying at the Polynesian, you can order your room service. You can order an Ohana Feast room service to your room, which is, great, especially if you're kind of like me and sometimes you just don't want to be around people, but you want to gorge. So if you're depressed and you're antisocial and you want to overindulge in food and cry, this is a great option when you're staying at the Poly.
It is. We've done that before when we've been at the Polynesian. I can remember. And another good note about that, if you're going to go ahead and do this, one portion, so to speak, is going to feed 2 to 3 people. 2 to 3 people with big appetites. One of their feast portions is huge.
Yep, absolutely. All right, number 3 on my list. Those who know me well, those who are good friends with me and that go out to eat with me a long time, may be surprised that I put this restaurant at number 3 because honestly, if I'm going to do something on property, if I'm going to take people out for a celebration or anything special, this is my go-to restaurant, yet it is at number 3, and I will explain why in a second. And that's Il Molino at the Walt Disney World Swan. Putting together, narrowing down to 5, my list of places I love to eat at Walt Disney World was really hard. It was a lot easier for me to come up with the 5 ones I didn't like. And the reason it's hard for me to come up with 5 that I do like is because the list really could be 15. There's a lot more good than there is bad. And that's good news for Walt Disney World. I think there's a lot more great restaurants than there are mediocre or downright bad. So for me, Il Molino, the pasta is made fresh every day. Pretty much everything you're served was purchased fresh that morning by the chef. It is an inspired menu. It is delicious. It is plentiful. The service is first rate. It's also very expensive. And what you find in these hotels that tend to cater to conventions. When you have business conventions, you have a lot of people who are on expense accounts, so the price can get jacked up a little bit. That being said, I still think Il Molino is an awesome choice for anybody wanting to celebrate something special. The original Il Molino is in New York City, a very famous restaurant, but hands down best Italian food at Walt Disney World, arguably best Italian food in Orlando, and right there at the Walt Disney World Swan. If you want a really wonderful evening, great service, really comforting, delicious, freshly prepared Italian food, you cannot do better than Il Molino.
I couldn't agree more. I've had a few experiences there, and I think all over property, you'll find good Italian food, really, really good Italian food, but this is by far the best.
It's a whole nother level.
Oh, definitely. Out of every time I've been there, I felt like the food was exceptional, but I also felt that the servers knew their menu inside out, like they know their stuff, and it really shows. So I can see why it deserves. What number was that? Number 3 by any chance?
Number 3.
Number 3 on your list. So moving on to my number 3, and I thought this was one that you were going to say after the lead you gave to your last one, but my number 3 is Citrico's at the Grand Floridian. So. Yeah, only ever dined there the once, and it was with you. It was actually the first time we ever met in person, and the service we received and the food was amazing. Yeah, it's one of the best dining experiences I've ever had in my life, let alone just on property. So you couldn't complain about a single item that was brought to the table. It was executed exceptionally well.
I agree. And Citrico's is absolutely among my favorites. However, for this list, I give it an honorable mention. It did not make my top 5. And that's just because, consistently good food, consistently good service. But I found when I really sat and thought about it, I found these other 5 tend to be where I'm more drawn to. And I also didn't want a top 5 list that was nothing but you got to kind of dress up and be in, where Ohana, you can just kind of go however you are. And even Il Molino, I think, has that atmosphere where it's, it's elegant, but it's really welcoming.
Yeah.
Unlike what is on my number 2. And this was really hard for me, 1 and 2. And it's only because of a recent experience that my number 2 was pushed to number 1. And this would be pushed because consistently my favorite restaurant on Disney property has always been the California Grill. But it is number 2 on my list. And here's why. And this is by a hair. Consistently great service, consistently great food, amazing view of the Magic Kingdom, especially it's at the top of the Contemporary Resort, so it's right there at the Magic Kingdom. If you time your meal to be there when the fireworks are going off, you have this amazing view of the fireworks from that restaurant. So really phenomenal. It is extraordinarily expensive. And often gets criticized for being too expensive for what you get. A lot of people say that, yeah, it's good, but it's not worth what you're paying. I kind of get that. But I still think this is a culinary experience. This is gourmet food at its best. This is a restaurant that could easily rest on its laurels, its location, its view, and serve subpar food, and they don't do it. They have the amazing location, amazing view, and amazing food, but be prepared to pay. Mm-hmm. So for that reason, I moved it to number 2 on my list. What's number 2 on yours?
Okay, so number 2 on mine was very, very, very nearly my number 1, and it is the Flying Fish at the Boardwalk. Yeah, very recently, the whole team and myself got to experience the Flying Fish. We got to meet the chef. We got to try the menu extensively. In fact, I'm pretty confident there isn't a single item on the menu that hasn't passed my lips. And that is why it's sitting at number 2, and it's so rare that you can say this, but absolutely everything that was put on that table in front of us was outstanding.
It was.
Whether you like seafood or not, which I know is a big issue for yourself. You're willing to try it, which is great, but you're not necessarily a seafood eater. These things were prepared and executed perfectly. Everything was a masterpiece. And a masterpiece, it was pretty to look at. It was tasty. It was an absolute outstanding experience. It was an amazing experience.
I agree it was, and I also enjoyed it a great deal. However, a requirement for me to get onto my list is consistency.
Yes.
And the Flying Fish recently reopened under a new chef, new decor, new menu, and I've only eaten there the once, and it was fantastic. It was absolutely amazing. But I have not eaten there enough in order for me to say I can put this on my top 5 list. My experience there last month was, for all of us, outstanding. But I need to go back and I need to try it a few more times before I can, if I go and have 2 or 3 more meals there and I walk away feeling the same way, then absolutely this is going to be very high on my list.
I completely agree. I've got a lot of confidence in that place. So after meeting Chef Tim Majoris, who is the head chef there, he's the passion that just comes across when you talk to that man is incredible. So I've got a lot of confidence in it maintaining its high standards, but it is going to be interesting to go back and and see what it's like. So
let's hear your number 1.
Okay, so for those of you that have been listening, you've probably been able to work it out, but my number one is the Yachtsman. And that's just because I enjoy steak, and I can hand on heart say that the steak I had at the Yachtsman was single-handedly the best piece of steak I have ever had in my life. It was amazing. It was one of those where, for those of you that eat steak, you know that obviously the more tender the piece of steak is, the better it is. I could touch my knife to it, and it felt like it was almost just sliding through it like butter. It was amazing. I was blown away. I really was.
Well, that is one of the ways you can tell a quality steak. If you can cut that steak with your fork,
Yes.
then that is a quality piece of meat.
Yeah.
So, like I said, for me, number one, and I agree, Yachtsman. I shared my thoughts on Yachtsman. Number one for me. This would have been number two a week ago. But after the dinner I had there last week, it's always been a great restaurant. I've always loved this restaurant. It's been consistently good since the day it opened. But I'm going to tell you, they recently, and I don't know her name, they recently got a new executive chef. And if the meal I had there last week is any indication, if it's at all possible, Gico is now better than it ever was before. When I tell you, a flawless meal. A meal that I walked away going, wow, this is just a whole new level and good. And it tells me that, seeing what's happening at the Flying Fish and now seeing Gico, that they really are. It seems like food and beverage at Disney World is really upping its game. And so I had to put Gico at number one because I felt it was a better value for what I paid versus what I get at California Grill. That's why it was really kind of splitting hairs. But when I looked at, the price of a meal for 4 people at Gico versus the same, the price of a meal for 4 people at California Grill, I have to give the edge to Gico. Absolutely beautiful space. Obviously not the view you get at California Grill, but the whole African influence on everything done with this incredible gourmet food. And if you are a fan of the old days when they had the filet mignon on the bed of homemade macaroni and cheese with the red wine reduction sauce, no longer on the menu, but they will make it for you if you ask. And that is consistently what I get. And even that was better than I remember it. It was phenomenal. The whole meal was phenomenal. And the bobotie rolls are just something that you have to have. It's incredible. The wild boar, amazing. So number one for me, Gico at Animal Kingdom Lodge. And that's why I was saying that, as far as resorts go, food and beverage, Animal Kingdom Lodge owns it. They just own it because they've got Gico. They've got Boma, which if we were doing best buffets, top of the list.
Yeah,
top of the list, Boma.
When we initially started making these lists, Boma was one of the first things that jumped into my head. And it was only when it
Me too.
occurred to me
I was ready to put it down. I'm like, no, it's a buffet. and Sanaa, all 3 at Animal Kingdom Lodge, and all 3 absolutely outstanding. So there we go. My top 5: Yachtsman, Ohana, Il Molino, California Grill, and Gico. And for you, Oliver?
It was Sanaa, and then followed by Ohana's, the Polynesian, and Citrico's, Flying Fish, and the Yachtsman Steakhouse.
So, based on our opinions, you can't go wrong at any of these places. But, of course, you may have a different take, and there may be something not on our list that is your favorite. So, by all means, feel free to share that in the comments. So, hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you again next time with our next best and worst of Walt Disney World. Have a good one.